There's a line most people never cross. A quiet threshold hidden beneath comfort, beneath common sense. Beyond it, thought becomes dangerous. Not because it's violent, but because it refuses to end. You sit alone in your room, or maybe you're lying in bed. The light is off, your mind drifts, and then you find yourself caught in a loop. A single question repeating, pulling you deeper. What am I really? At first, it feels like curiosity. Then the floor beneath your thoughts begins to crack. You realize there's no final answer. Every idea collapses into another idea. Every belief swallows itself. This is the place where philosophers lose sleep, where monks walk in silence for years, not because they know peace, but because they've seen something no one else dares to look at. A kind of truth so raw, so recursive, it untangles reality itself. In this video, you'll hear 25 paradoxes that live on that edge, thought experiments and philosophical traps that exist in real life, in your own mind, in history and language. These aren't riddles with solutions. These are thoughts designed to break your thoughts, questions that keep opening wider every time you answer them. Some of them may sound simple at first. A choice, a shadow, a mirror. But if you follow them all the way down, you'll find there's no bottom. That's why this isn't just another video about philosophy. This is a quiet invitation into the darker corners of your own awareness. Don't expect to feel comfortable. Don't expect clarity. Instead, lean into the unknown. Let the contradictions unfold slowly. Let your mind wander past its usual limits, and when it feels like too much, when it feels like you might lose yourself, that's exactly where you're supposed to be. Welcome to the philosophy that thinks you back. You wake up, you stretch your arms, you take a breath. Somewhere in the back of your mind, there's a quiet satisfaction, the sense that your choices belong to you. You can stand or sit, speak or stay silent, open the door or keep it closed. Freedom. But what if freedom itself is a kind of cage? That sounds impossible, a contradiction too obvious. Yet history, psychology, and philosophy suggest something unsettling. The more choices you have, the less free you feel. Imagine a simple village in past. One job, one path, one belief. Life moves in predictable rhythms. There are no major decisions to make, no real options beyond survival and ritual. Now imagine modern life. Countless careers, infinite products, infinite information, infinite identities. To choose from. At first glance, that seems like true freedom. But look closer. Studies in psychology show that too many choices lead to paralysis. Instead of feeling liberated, the mind begins to freeze, constantly weighing possibilities. A simple decision, what to eat, what to wear, who to be, becomes a labyrinth. This is known as the paradox of choice. But there's a deeper layer beneath that, because even if you limit your options, even if you choose one path, you carry the awareness of all the paths you didn't take. The ghost of unrealized possibilities follows you. Every action becomes a tiny betrayal of every other action you could have chosen. You feel it when you stand in a supermarket aisle, overwhelmed by endless brands of the same item. You feel it when scrolling through endless videos, unable to decide what to watch, and at a higher level, you feel it when thinking about your life itself. No matter how large the cage is, the very existence of its walls, defined by the limits of your own mind and your own body, means that freedom is always partially an illusion. Even your deepest preferences, the things you think you love or hate, were shaped by a million invisible influences, childhood experiences, cultural background, subconscious patterns. Are you really choosing or just reacting to a script written before you knew how to read it? This is where the paradox sharpens. You are free to choose anything, but that freedom itself becomes a prison. The wider the gates open, the heavier they feel. The ancient Stoics knew this. So did Buddhist monks, who practiced renunciation, not because they hated choice, but because they recognized that fewer choices meant clearer peace. But modern society pushes in the opposite direction. Infinite content, infinite possibility. And yet, more people than ever feel trapped, anxious, unsatisfied. It's not a failure of willpower. It's a failure of philosophy that you are free, but only within the boundaries of your own awareness. You are free, but only if you know how to let go of choice itself. That is the real escape. Not more options. Fewer. Not more freedom. Simpler. Freedom. But ask yourself now, would you really want that? Or has the cage already become too familiar, too comfortable to ever leave? You open your eyes and there's light. It fills the room. It fills your thoughts. A soft morning sun through the window, or perhaps a bright street lamp in the middle of the night. Light reveals things. Light shows truth. That's what we've always believed. But what if light can also blind you? Not by its absence, but by its overwhelming presence. There's a paradox in both philosophy and neuroscience that begins with something simple. If too much light shines in your eyes, you see nothing. Step outside into the sun after a dark room, and all you'll find is white. No shape, no color, no clarity. Your mind, too, works in the same way. We spend our lives searching for clarity, for understanding, for knowledge, for certainty. We read, we listen, we fill ourselves with ideas, but there's a hidden line. Too much information doesn't reveal the world. It drowns it. Imagine looking at a painting. First, you see the image, a face, a landscape. But then someone begins telling you everything about it, the paint composition, the exact color codes, the brushstroke angles, the artist's biography, the political context. At a certain point, the painting disappears. All you see now is noise. The details become so bright, so sharp, they erase the thing itself. This is called the paradox of overexposure. It happens in thought. It happens in relationships. It happens in life. You want to know yourself? But if you keep analyzing every thought, every feeling, every tiny shift in your mind, you lose the simple presence of being alive. It's like staring directly at the sun, trying to understand its nature by looking harder and harder. In the end, you see nothing but blindness. Zen philosophy speaks of this. The idea that true understanding isn't about adding more light, more thought, more detail, but about seeing with less, with softness, with quiet, because there's another layer to this paradox. Light doesn't just blind the eyes. It blinds the soul. When we chase more knowledge, more content, more stimulation, we create a mental environment so bright that nothing can cast a shadow. And without shadow, there is no depth. No silence, no rest. Modern life amplifies this trap. Constant notifications, infinite scroll, news feeds, opinions layered upon opinions. You might believe you're becoming wiser, but what's really happening is a drowning in light. The human mind evolved to live in contrast, light and dark, knowledge and mystery, clarity and uncertainty. Remove that balance and everything collapses into a flat, blinding wall. So now ask yourself, what in your life have you illuminated so much that you stopped seeing it? What truth has become invisible because of too much attention? And would you dare to close your eyes for a moment and see again? There is a silence that lives between thoughts. But before that silence, there's always a question. Why? How? Who am I? What is all of this? Human thought is shaped by questions. We ask them without end. Philosophers, scientists, children lying, awake at night. But hidden inside every question is a strange kind of danger, one that grows more powerful the deeper you think. Imagine standing in front of a mirror, asking, what is behind me? You turn, another mirror, another reflection. You turn again and again, but each time, what you see is only yourself asking the question. This is what philosophers sometimes call the paradox of self-destroying inquiry. A question so sharp that if you follow it all the way, it collapses in on itself. Think about the most basic question there is. Why does anything exist at all? At first, it seems like a real inquiry. Maybe there's a cause, a purpose, a reason. But the further you trace it, reason after reason after reason, eventually you reach something without an answer, without an edge. And beyond that edge, the question has nowhere left to go. Some physicists call this the point where science stops. Some mystics call it the void. Some call it God, but whatever name you give it, the question breaks. It becomes like a serpent eating its own tail, what ancient symbols call the Ouroboros. A loop with no exit. And in that loop, human thought finds its limit. The paradox grows darker when applied to the self. Ask yourself, who am I? You'll list your name, your memories, your body, but every label you give is just another layer. Remove the name, remove the memory, remove the body. What's left? The one asking the question, but what is that? Keep looking, and the self disappears. Like staring at your own eyes in a mirror until the face behind them fades into blankness. This is why in both philosophy and spiritual traditions, there is a final question that no one can answer. Not because the answer is hidden, but because the act of asking destroys both the question and the answer. It's like turning a flashlight on in a pitch black room only to find the room itself was made of light all along. There was never a separate object. Never a thing to see. Only the act of looking. Only the act of asking. And so the loop closes. You stand there holding the question in your hand, realizing it has no weight, no substance. Like a knife that cuts itself in half the moment it strikes. So now pause. Let the silence after this thought settle around you. Ask one more time, who is asking? And then let the question die. You walk through life believing in a simple truth that you are someone, a name, a story, a self. From childhood, you collect memories like stones in your pocket. Moments, victories, mistakes, all shaped into a sense of identity. But there is a darker truth hiding beneath that comfort. The more you search for who you really are, the more the answer dissolves. Psychology calls it self-concept. Neuroscience calls it neural patterns. Philosophy calls it ego, but all of them circle the same haunting realization. The self may not exist in the way you believe. It starts with memory. You think of memory as a recording, but each time you remember something, your brain rewrites it slightly. What you recall today is not exactly what happened, but a version shaped by emotion, expectation, and even the act of remembering itself, layer by layer. The story of who you are becomes a shifting illusion, but memory is just the first thread. Pull on it and the fabric unravels further. Consider personality. You may say, I'm a kind person, or I'm someone who doesn't give up. But where did that belief come from? Was it taught by family, by culture, by moments you half remember? Every label you wear, introvert, extrovert, strong, weak, is a reflection of external forces, shaping your mind like wind shapes a stone. And here is the core of the paradox. The more you define yourself, the less of yourself is left. You are like a word spoken so many times it loses meaning. A face seen in too many mirrors until it becomes a blur. Buddhist philosophy speaks of this as anatta, the doctrine of no self, not a soul trapped in a body, but a process. Thought appearing, feeling appearing, memory appearing, none of it fixed. None of it truly. You imagine standing in front of a mirror and seeing no reflection. At first, it feels terrifying. But then, there is a kind of peace. Without a fixed self, there's no burden to defend it. No need to protect an illusion. No need to cling to identity like armor. You become like a river, moving, changing, flowing, never the same twice. This is why some of the oldest philosophies speak of letting go, not as surrender, but as freedom. From the prison of self-image, but here's the final layer of the paradox. Even as you listen now, thinking about these words, you are still building a new identity. The one who understands. The one who is learning. The self erases itself. By creating itself again, a loop, a mirror inside a mirror. And you may never escape it. Unless, for just a moment, you let go of even that. You wake up in the morning and trust what you see. The ceiling, the light, the walls around you. Everything feels solid, real, consistent. But what if all of it is an illusion created inside your own mind? This isn't just fantasy. Neuroscience has proven that your brain doesn't directly experience reality. It only receives signals light, sound, pressure, and from those signals, it builds a model. That model is what you call the world. Here begins the paradox. Your mind is trapped inside a system it created, unable to step outside and verify. If it's true, imagine living your entire life inside a perfectly designed simulation. You don't know it's a simulation because everything inside feels normal. The sky is blue. The wind is cold. Your heart beats when you're scared. But outside the simulation, you have no access. No way to compare. Now realize this is your actual situation. Even if you touch a stone, feel its weight, hear its sound against the ground, it's still only electrical signals processed by neurons. You don't touch the stone directly. You touch your mind's version of it. Philosophers call this the veil of perception. You live inside a map of the world created by your brain, but you never see the territory itself. And it gets deeper because even thoughts, memories, feelings, things you call internal truth, are part of the same illusion. Your brain constructs not just the outside world, but the inside world too, which means there's nowhere solid to stand, no fixed point. Number. Certainty. You think you're sitting in a chair, but what you're really experiencing is a carefully crafted hallucination, consistent, predictable, but still a hallucination. Even color isn't real. Physics tells us there's no such thing as red or blue. Those are just wavelengths, interpreted by your visual system in a way your mind has learned to label dots. So here's the paradox fully revealed. Your mind creates the world it believes it's observing. You live inside a bubble made of thought, a thought about reality, a thought about self, a thought about thought. There's no escape, because even the desire to escape is part of the same illusion. This is why ancient traditions, from Zen to Western skepticism, speak of emptying the mind. Not to destroy reality, but to see beyond. It's a created image, but would you dare do it? Would you risk looking into that emptiness, knowing there might be nothing there but silence? That's where the mind strap holds you most tightly. Even now, as you hear these words, your mind is building another layer, understanding, categorizing, holding on to the idea of illusion. But holding on to illusion is still illusion. So pause, breathe, look around and ask yourself one final time, how do you know any of this is real? You walk into a room quiet and still. The moment your foot touches the floor, dust rises, air shifts. A quiet balance is broken simply because you are there. Now take that image and stretch it into something bigger, not just rooms, but reality. Itself. In physics, there's something called the observer effect. It tells us that simply observing a system changes that system. From particles in a lab to entire ecosystems in the wild, measurement and observation are not passive. They create disturbance, but there's a darker layer beneath the science. One that philosophy has been circling for centuries. What if everything you try to control or understand becomes unstable the moment you focus on it? You look into your own mind trying to calm it, and try to stop worrying, to feel peaceful. But the very act of observing your thoughts makes them louder. Like trying to smooth the surface of water with your hand. The more effort, the more ripples. This is the paradox of the observer creating chaos. You want clarity, so you look harder. But looking creates disturbance. You want control, so you grip tighter. But gripping makes things slip away. It shows up in simple life moments. Think of sleep. The harder you try to fall asleep, the more awake you feel. Or love. The moment you analyze a feeling too much, it starts to disappear. Now imagine applying this paradox to everything. Not just emotions, not just science, but existence itself. There's a theory in quantum mechanics, still debated, but haunting nonetheless, that reality only takes shape when observed. Before that, it exists in a kind of fog, probability waves, undefined and ghost dash like dots. So your presence doesn't just disturb things, it creates them. But never in the way you expect. Never in the way you can fully control. This is why some traditions teach detachment. Observing without grabbing. Witnessing without interfering. But Here's the final twist. Even non-interference is a kind of interference. Even silence leaves a footprint. You cannot escape the loop. To observe is to create. To create is to change. And to change is to lose. The very thing you hope to preserve. The stillness was only there before you entered the room. Now it's gone. You sit in a quiet room. No music, no voices. No machines humming in the background. At first, it feels peaceful. But listen closer. You notice something strange. The silence isn't empty. It pulses. It presses in. Your own heartbeat. The faint, ringing your ears. Thoughts louder now than any noise. Silence isn't silence anymore. It's louder than sound. This is the paradox of silence, louder than sound. It begins as a physical truth. Neuroscience calls it auditory contrast. When the external world quiets down, your brain amplifies its own signals. Internal noises, blood, flow, nervous system, hum, rise up into awareness. But there's more, because silence doesn't just expose physical noise. It exposes mental noise. When there are no distractions, the mind reveals its own volume, worries, regrets, memories, plans, thought. Loops rising up like echoes in a canyon. You experience this when trying to meditate, or when lying awake late at night. The room is silent, your mind is shouting, and the more you try to quiet it, the louder it becomes. There's a moment in deep philosophical thought where silence becomes unbearable. When you've stripped away music, language, beliefs, what remains? Just raw consciousness. But consciousness hates a vacuum. It rushes to fill empty space with content. So silence becomes a kind of noise. The noise of self-awareness. This is why ancient mystics speak of silence, not as the absence of sound, but as the presence of something deeper, a silence so heavy it crushes thought. A silence that reveals the full weight of existence. Imagine standing in a vast cave. No echoes, no breeze. Just endless stillness. At first, it feels calm. But after a while, that stillness begins to press against your skin, your mind, your identity. You start to hear things that aren't there. Phantom whispers. Memories rising from nowhere. This isn't madness. It's perception stripped to its core. And here's the paradox fully revealed. Silence is never truly silent. It amplifies everything. Hidden beneath the surface. It shows you the structure of your own awareness by removing everything else. You can test it now. Pause this video. Sit in complete stillness for 5 minutes. No phone, no music, just yourself. You'll notice 2 things. First, the mind's refusal to be quiet. Second, the creeping awareness that there is no true escape from that noise, except perhaps in death. Because as long as you are conscious, there is sound, even in the quietest room in the world, even in the deepest part of your mind. Silence speaks. And sometimes it speaks louder than anything else. You sit quietly, a single thought running through your mind. Maybe it's a memory, maybe it's a question. You hold on to it, examine it, feel its shape. But then something strange happens. As you think about the thought, another thought appears. And another. The first thought fades, replaced by the next and the next. This is how the mind works. Thought constantly erasing thought. You might believe there's a stable self behind all this activity. But watch closely and you'll find only a stream, a flow of moments. With no solid core. It's like writing words in the sand while waves wash over them. Each word disappears as soon as it's written. Philosophy calls this the paradox of thought erasing thought. Thought to think is to lose what you just thought. You feel it every day. You set out to remember something only to forget it halfway through the act. You try to concentrate, but your mind jumps from one idea to the next. In Zen practice. This is called the monkey mind, a restless energy that never stays still. But there's a darker side to it, because even the deepest truths, the sharpest insights, are not immune. You may reach a moment of clarity about yourself, about life, about reality, but before you can hold on to it, another thought rises to take its place. A distraction, a worry, a stray memory. And the clarity dissolves. Even now, as you listen, To these words, your mind may already be wandering. This constant erasure isn't just a flaw. It's built into consciousness itself. Neuroscience shows that memory isn't permanent. It's reconstructed layer by layer. Each time it's recalled. Each reconstruction slightly rewrites the past and thought. Thought is even more fragile. By the time you finish thinking one sentence, the next sentence has already overwritten it. So where is the center? Where is the anchor? Buddhist philosophy answers with silence. Stopping the stream altogether. Watching without chasing. Letting thoughts rise and fall like waves without trying to hold them. But even that is temporary, because the moment you notice silence, you are already thinking again. That's the final twist of the paradox. Even the thought of no thought is still a thought. You cannot escape it. Like painting over a canvas again and again until there's nothing but layers of color with no original image left beneath. The mind erases itself to survive. And so it continues thought, erasing thought forever. In every light, there is a shadow. That's the rule you learn as a child. Shine a lamp, cast a shape. Light defines form, and shadow defines the limits of that form. But now imagine something stranger. A shadow that lights itself. At first, it feels impossible. Shadows exist because light is blocked. A shadow cannot be its own source of light, or can it? This is more than just a trick of physics. It's a paradox buried deep in both philosophy and perception. The paradox of shadow lighting itself. It begins with self-awareness. You look at your own flaws, your own darkness, fear, anger, guilt, weakness. Most people try to hide these shadows, to push them away, deny them, cover them with artificial light. But in that very act of denial, the shadow grows stronger. Psychologists call this the shadow self. The parts of you refuse to see. Carl Jung wrote that integrating your shadow is the path to true wholeness. And here's where the paradox turns. Only by accepting your own darkness can you truly see yourself. The shadow becomes its own light. By bringing it into awareness, the hidden becomes visible. And what was once dangerous becomes a source of clarity. It's like walking through a dark forest with no lamp. At first, everything feels terrifying. Shapes moving in the blackness. But as your eyes adjust, you begin to see through the dark. Darkness reveals itself by its own. Quiet glow. Now take that image and apply it to your mind. The things you fear about yourself are not removed by avoiding them. They are only removed by staring straight into them. Anger shows you what you care about. Fear shows you where your limits are. Sadness shows you what matters. These are not failures. They are signals, but most people never look long enough to notice. Instead, they flood their lives with distractions, noise, bright lights, constant movement. Always escaping the shadow. But as long as you run from it, it grows behind you, larger, colder, heavier. Until one day, it consumes everything. So here's the final shape of the paradox. The only way to escape your shadow is to let it light your path, not as an enemy, but as a guide. Stand still. Breathe, look into the dark parts of yourself, and you might find they were never dark at all, only waiting. You close your eyes and the memory appears, maybe yesterday, maybe years ago, a face, a place, a feeling. You trust that memory as something solid, a record of what really happened. But what if memory isn't a record? What if memory is more like a story written in real time by your own mind? This is the paradox of memory writing itself. It begins with a simple discovery in neuroscience. Every time you recall a memory, your brain doesn't just retrieve it. It edits it, rewrites it, resaves it, like opening a document, changing a few words, and hitting save, except you don't realize you've changed anything. Over time, memories shift, small details blur. Some grow sharper while others vanish, but there's a deeper layer. Because memory isn't just unstable, it's creative. Your mind fills in gaps automatically. If a detail is missing, your brain invents one that feels right. A color, a sound, a sentence someone never said. And once invented, that false detail becomes as real as everything else. You experience this without noticing it. A childhood moment you're sure of. Until someone shows you a photo that contradicts. A conversation you remember perfectly, except the other person remembers it differently. Psychologists call this memory reconstruction, but the paradox sharpens further when applied to identity, because memory is not just about the past. It's about who you believe you are. Your entire sense of self is built on memories, successes, failures, lessons learned. But if those memories are unstable, if they rewrite themselves constantly, then who are you really? A moving target. A story that rewrites itself as you read it. You believe you're reading a history book, but you're holding a blank page. And as you read, the words appear for the first time. Even now, as you remember things about yourself right now, your mind is editing them, which means you can never fully trust your own past. And here's the final twist. Even the act of realizing this changes your memories, by thinking about memories' instability. You introduce a new layer, one that wasn't there before. The loop closes. Memory writes itself. While you're remembering it writing itself, like a pen that draws its own hand holding the pen. You cannot step outside it. You can only watch the ink dry, knowing it was never permanent. You open your eyes and feel the room around you. Walls, air, light coming through a window. It feels solid. It feels real, but deep down, a quiet question stirs. What if I'm still dreaming? This is the paradox of the dream refusing to end. You've felt it before, waking up from a vivid dream and wondering just for a moment if you're truly awake. You blink. You touch your hand, but the feeling doesn't always vanish. Philosophers and neuroscientists have explored this for centuries. Descartes once asked, "How can I trust that I'm not dreaming right now?" Even in modern sleep research, lucid dreamers report waking up from one dream, only to find they were inside another. A dream within a dream. The deeper truth is this: your mind doesn't experience reality directly. It creates a model of the world using sensory input, memory, and expectation. In both waking life and dreams. That model feels equally real. It means there's no absolute test, no final proof. That separates waking from dreaming. Every moment could be a layer in a larger dream. Even now. Even here, you hear these words. You feel your body. But in the quiet edges of awareness, there's always a gap, a space where certainty breaks down. In some traditions, like Tibetan Buddhism, this is called the waking dream, not just metaphorically, but literally life as a continuous self-generating dream. A story unfolding moment by moment, shaped by thought, language, and perception. And here is the paradox fully revealed. The harder you try to wake up, the deeper into the dream you go, because the act of questioning reality is itself part of the same system. A dream about waking, a thought about thinking. There's no outside, no clean exit, unless perhaps in death. But even that, some say, may only lead to another layer. So now pause, feel your breath, feel your surroundings, and ask yourself quietly, am I awake, or is this still the dream? The moment you ask, the dream has already answered. You laugh, you feel warmth, a perfect moment, sunlight on your face, music in your ears, someone's voice saying exactly the right words. For a second, it feels pure. Joy, unbroken. But beneath that feeling, there's always something else. A shadow, a quiet ache. This is the paradox of pain hidden in joy. It begins as something simple in psychology. Even your happiest moments carry a seed of fear. What if this doesn't last? Scientists studying happiness found that the peak of joy is almost always followed by a dip, a quiet sadness, a hollow space where pleasure used to be. It's called the hedonic treadmill. No matter how high you climb, you always return to baseline. But there's a deeper level, one that philosophy explores more quietly. Joy isn't separate from pain. It depends on it. You cannot feel happiness without knowing what its absence feels like. If there were no sadness, happiness would lose its meaning. Pleasure depends on contrast, even in the smallest things. A favorite meal, a song you love, there's a limit. If you repeat it endlessly, joy turns to boredom. Too much sweetness becomes bitter. Too much light burns the eyes. This is why some ancient philosophies taught not to chase constant pleasure, but to find balance instead, joy and pain as two sides of the same coin. Now, take it deeper. Think about the biggest moments in your life. Falling. In love, achieving something great. Holding on to a memory you cherish. What do all of them share? The knowledge that they will end. That's what makes them precious. That's what makes them hurt. Joy carries its own ending inside it. Like a flame already, burning toward its own extinguishing dot, and here's the paradox fully revealed. If you try to avoid pain by chasing only joy, you end up hollow dot because joy without shadow becomes empty. Meaningless dot is not pain despite joy. It's pain inside joy dot, the bittersweet edge of every perfect moment. You felt it before, laughing until you cry, smiling even as a tear slips down your cheek, dot both feelings, alive at once, dot. So pause now. Think of your happiest memory dot feel. The warmth of it dot, and notice, inside that warmth, the quiet ache, the silent reminder that everything beautiful carries its own ending. You stand at a crossroads in your life, left or right. Stay or leave, speak or stay silent. You feel the weight of it, free will pressing against you like a hand on your back. But what if at the deepest level, the choice has already been made? This is the paradox of choice already made. It begins with neuroscience. Studies show that before you consciously decide to move, to lift your hand, to say a word, there's already activity in your brain. Measurable seconds before awareness. The decision happens first. Conscious awareness follows later. In other words, you think you're choosing, but you're really just observing yourself choosing. Philosophers call this the illusion of free will. From the outside, it feels like freedom. But under the surface, there are currents moving you, genetics, experience, subconscious patterns laid down by childhood, language, culture, even mood. Imagine standing in front of two doors. You think you're free to pick either one, but all your past, everything from your biology to last night's sleep, has already tilted you toward one side. By the time you reach for the handle, it was inevitable. And here's where the paradox sharpens. Even knowing this doesn't change it. If you decide to rebel against your programming, that very act of rebellion was part of the pattern all along. Like a river thinking it has chosen its path, not realizing the banks were carved long before it arrived. Now imagine your entire life shaped this way. Every major decision, every minor one, a sequence of dominoes falling one by one, even as you believe you're the one pushing them. And yet, here's the twist. That illusion may be necessary, because if you truly accepted there was no choice, you might stop acting altogether. You might freeze, collapse. So the mind creates a story. I chose this. Even if, in the deepest sense, you didn't. This is why ancient philosophies like Stoicism don't focus on control. They focus on accepting the flow, because the paradox is not about giving up. It's about moving with the current as if you had chosen it, even knowing the choice was already made. You search for truth. Everyone does. Whether in philosophy, science, religion, or quiet moments alone, there's always the question, what is real? What is absolutely true? But hidden deep within that search is a trap. Some truths, once fully understood, erase themselves. This is the paradox of truth that destroys itself. It starts with simple logic. Imagine someone saying, everything I say is a lie. If that sentence is true, then it must also be false. And if it's false, maybe it's true after all. This is called the liar's paradox. But it's more than just a clever riddle. In both philosophy and physics, there are truths so absolute they collapse under their own weight. Take knowledge. The more you know, the more you realize what you don't know. Expanding awareness reveals new blind spots. Or take observation itself. In quantum mechanics, observing a particle changes its behavior. Simply knowing the truth alters the truth. But there's a deeper, more personal level. When you believe something completely about yourself, about life, about others, that belief can become so rigid it closes you off from reality. The truth becomes a prison. You have felt this in arguments. You're sure you're right, so you stop listening. You shut out new information. And in that moment, your truth becomes a kind of blindness, ancient Zen. Teachings describe this as the trap of clinging to form. If you grasp too tightly to any idea, even the idea of truth itself, it slips through your fingers. Here's an even sharper version of the paradox. Imagine a perfect, universal truth that explains everything. If such a truth existed, it would leave no room for doubt, no room for discovery, no room for thought, and without thought, there would be no mind left to understand it. The truth would erase the need for itself. This is why many philosophical traditions focus not on holding truth, but on letting it go. Silence, emptiness, the absence of fixed answers. Because sometimes the only way to see clearly is to stop looking for clarity. Now pause for a moment. Think of the things you hold as absolute truths about yourself, about reality. What if those truths are quietly undoing themselves as you believe them? What if knowing is the same as unknowing? That is the shape of this paradox. A truth so complete, it disappears. You feel it suddenly. That tightening in your chest, that cold wave through your body. Fear. It happens when you sense danger. Loss, failure. At its core, fear exists to protect you, to keep you alive. But what if that same fear, left unchecked, becomes the very thing that destroys you? This is the paradox of fear protecting through destruction. Imagine an animal sensing a predator. Its heart races, muscles tense. That reaction saves its life. But in humans, fear doesn't just live in the body. It lives in the mind, sometimes triggered by things that don't even exist. The future, the past. Imagine threats. Fear can protect you from stepping in front of a car, but it can also stop you from speaking your mind, pursuing your goals, or even living fully. A person afraid of failure may never try. A person afraid of loss may never love. And here's where the paradox deepens. The more you try to avoid what you fear, the more likely you are to experience it. You fear loneliness, so you push people away. You fear poverty, so you refuse to take any financial risks and stay trapped. You fear death, so you avoid life. In psychology, this is called avoidance behavior. It feels safe in the short term, but long term, it narrows your world. Shrinks your life until there's nothing left outside the walls of fear. Now take it deeper. Philosophically, fear doesn't just distort life. It distorts reality. When you act from fear, everything looks sharper, darker, more dangerous than it really is. Your mind builds a cage and locks itself inside. The irony is sharp. The cage is meant to protect you, but inside it, you suffocate. This is why some ancient traditions, like Stoicism or Zen, teach not to eliminate fear, but to observe it without attachment. To let fear rise and let it fall, like waves on the surface of the mind. Because once you see fear clearly, without running from it, it begins to lose its power. But that's the hardest step, because fear whispers in your ear, stay safe, stay small, stay hidden, and it feels like protection. Until you realize that protection is exactly what's holding you back. So now pause, breathe, ask yourself quietly, what am I afraid of? That's already shaping my life. And is that fear protecting me or quietly destroying me? You speak a word and it fills the air, a sound where there was none, but before that word there was silence, and after it, silence again. This is the paradox of voice born from silence. At first, it seems obvious. Speech must come from silence, no sound. Sound. But there's a deeper layer, one that reaches beyond language into thought, identity, even existence itself. Philosophy and physics both touch on it. Before anything exists, there's nothing. Out of nothing comes something. Out of silence, a voice. But how? You see it in your own mind. Before a thought arises, there's a blank space, a quiet field. Then suddenly, words appear. Ideas, images, but where did they come from? Not from another thought. Because tracing back each thought leads eventually to silence. This silence isn't empty. It's potential, like a canvas before paint, like space before a star is born. And here's where the paradox sharpens. The louder your voice, the more you risk drowning out the silence it came from. The more you think, the less you notice the stillness underneath thought. But without silence, there's no true voice. Imagine standing in a vast canyon. You shout. The echo returns. But without the silence of the canyon, there would be no echo at all. Silence gives voice its shape. Now take this idea deeper into self-awareness. You believe you have a continuous identity, a constant voice in your head telling you who you are, but that voice rests on silence when you fall asleep. When you meditate, when you lose yourself in music or art, that inner voice fades, and what remains is pure awareness without words. Some traditions call this original mind, the silent space before thought. Before self-doubt, and yet we fear that silence. We fill it with noise, with stories, with opinions, because silence feels like emptiness, like death. But without it, life loses depth. A song made only of noise, with no pauses, becomes meaningless. A sentence with no spaces between words becomes unreadable. So here's the paradox fully revealed. To find your true voice, you must first return to silence. Not just once. Again and again, letting the words fall away. Letting thought fall away until all that remains is the quiet before the first word, the moment right before everything begins. You stand before a mirror. You see your face, your eyes, your mouth, the familiar shape of yourself. It feels undeniable, solid, real. But what if that reflection isn't telling you the truth? This is the paradox of the mirror reflecting lies. First, it feels like a simple trick. You know, a mirror flips left and right. Lighting can change how you look. But the paradox goes deeper. A mirror shows you only the surface. But because you trust your eyes, you believe you're seeing the whole truth. Psychologically, this happens in your mind as well. You build an image of yourself from reflections. Not just mirrors, but other people's opinions, social feedback, memories. You believe you know who you are because you've seen it reflected back to you. But those reflections are incomplete. When you look in a mirror, you don't see your back. You don't see your heartbeat. You don't see your fears. You see only the mask. And over time, that mask becomes a kind of prison. You play a role. You act in ways that match the image you expect to see. Confident, quiet, loud, kind, cruel. But beneath all that, there's something else. The parts of you, the mirror, can never show. Philosophers call this the problem of appearance versus reality. The mirror is appearance. What's beneath it is reality. Yet, most of life is lived through appearances. Social media, photographs, reputations, all are mirrors reflecting not just one lie, but layers upon layers of lies. You post a perfect picture. You share a perfect moment. But underneath, there may be sadness, fear, confusion. The mirror shows one side and hides everything else. Now take it deeper. Even self-reflection. Thinking about yourself as a kind of mirror when you describe your personality, your beliefs, your memories. You're not touching reality directly. You're looking through layers of reflection shaped by language and thought. And here's the paradox sharpened. The more mirrors you add, the harder it becomes to see the truth. But without mirrors, you would see nothing at all. So now stand quietly. Breathe, look into a mirror, and ask yourself, what is this showing me, and what is it hiding? Because sometimes the clearest reflection is the biggest lie. You wake up and trust the world around you. The walls, the sky, the sound of your own voice. Reality feels solid, permanent, but deep down, you already know nothing stays solid forever. This is the paradox of reality melting away. It begins in science. Physicists once believed that space and time were fixed, an unchanging stage where life unfolds. But the deeper they looked, the more unstable everything became. At the quantum level, particles blink in and out of existence. Time bends, space curves. The foundations of reality melt beneath observation, but you don't need a physics lab to feel it. Sit quietly and pay attention. Notice how the edges of things blur if you stare long enough. How your mind fills in gaps? Your brain is constantly stitching together fragments. Light, sound, memory. Creating a picture that feels whole, even if it's built from incomplete parts. Psychologists call this perceptual stability. Your mind smooths over chaos. But that doesn't mean the chaos isn't there. Now, think about dreams. While you sleep, the world inside your mind feels just as real as waking life. Until it collapses. 1 second, you're flying. The next, you're in bed. And for a brief moment, the border between dream and reality melts away. But here's the deeper layer. Even in waking life, that same melting happens constantly. Memories fade. Emotions change. What felt important yesterday feels hollow today. The self you believe in changes moment to moment. And if everything from particles to thoughts is shifting, what does it mean for reality to be real at all? Philosophers call this impermanence, the idea that everything is in constant flux. Nothing stands still. Nothing holds shape forever. But here's the paradox fully revealed. The only thing permanent is change itself. Reality melts, but that melting is its true nature. You can fight it. You can try to hold on. But the tighter you grip, the faster things slip away. Like ice in your hand, dissolving into water. Like a face in the mirror fading into fog. Now pause. Look around. Notice how everything you see is already changing. Light shifting. Breath moving. And ask yourself if reality is always melting. What is left to hold on to? You start walking forward. Always forward. That's how life feels. A path stretching ahead into the unknown. New places. New decisions. But somewhere along the way, you notice something strange. The path doesn't lead forward at all. It leads back. This is the paradox of the path leading back. At first, it sounds like a riddle. How can moving forward bring you to where you already were? But look closer. You chase success, only to find yourself wanting the simplicity you left behind. You seek knowledge only to realize that, at the end of it, you value silence more. You climb to the top of a mountain, only to look back at the valley and miss it. In philosophy, this is reflected in both Eastern and Western traditions. Taoism speaks of the return. Everything that moves outward eventually returns inward. The Greeks called it palingenesis, cycles of rebirth and return. Even in physics, closed-loop systems mirror this idea. Objects in orbit, planets circling, stars, energy flowing in cycles. But the paradox isn't just about nature. It's about the human mind. You believe growth is a straight line. More knowledge, more power, more experience. But over time, you realize that what you truly want often looks like where you began. Freedom, simplicity, peace, a child playing with nothing. But dirt and sky might already have what the adult spends a lifetime searching for. But here's the paradox, Shrepend. You cannot reach that return without first walking the full path. You must lose yourself to find yourself again, like a river that circles back to its source after traveling through oceans and mountains, or a person who leaves home only to understand its value once they've been away. This is why ancient philosophies teach that enlightenment isn't gaining something new. It's remembering something old. Returning, not arriving. So now pause. Breathe. Think about where you are in your own path. Are you moving forward? Or are you quietly already on your way back to where you began? You carry a name, a story. Everywhere you go, these things follow you like a shadow. This is who I am. You say it without thinking. Your job, your personality, your past, they feel solid, permanent. But what if that very identity is quietly consuming itself? This is the paradox of identity consuming itself. It begins with something simple in psychology. The more tightly you hold on to a label, the more trapped you become by it. A person who calls themselves brave might avoid showing fear, even when afraid. A person who believes they're kind might hide their anger, even when it's necessary. The identity you choose starts shaping your actions. But slowly, those actions reshape you in return. At first, it feels like control. Then it starts to feel like a cage. Imagine carving a statue. At first, you chip away freely. But As the shape forms, every new cut risks ruining what's already there. Dot identity becomes preservation. You stop growing. You protect the image instead of living the reality. Dot now, take it deeper. Dot philosophically. Identity isn't just a social story. It's a mental loop. You remember things about yourself. Those memories reinforce certain choices. Those choices reinforce certain memories. Over time, the loop hardens, but everything outside that loop begins to disappear. Parts of yourself get left behind, forgotten, buried. In Zen teachings, this is called ego clinging. The self holding on to itself so tightly, it begins to suffocate. The paradox sharpens here. The more complete your identity feels, the less room there is for anything new. Until the self you've built starts eating itself, protecting the story, not the life. Imagine a flame burning so brightly it consumes its own fuel faster and faster until there's nothing left. That's what happens when identity becomes everything. And yet, here's the twist. Without some identity, you would be lost, floating, directionless. So the paradox isn't about destroying the self completely. It's about holding identity lightly, like holding water in your hands, not clenching a stone. Now pause. Think of the things you tell yourself about who you are. Are they alive? Or are they already turning to ash? Because if you hold too tightly, you may find there's nothing left to hold on to at all. You want something. Maybe it's simple, a glass of water, a quiet room. Maybe it's larger, love, power, peace. Desire moves everything. It pulls you forward, drives your choices. But what happens when one desire pulls against another? This is the paradox of desire fighting desire. At first, it sounds ordinary. Everyone has mixed feelings sometimes. But look closer, and you'll see this isn't just a human flaw. It's built into the very structure of wanting. Imagine colon, you want freedom. But you also want security, you want love. But you also want independence, you want simplicity. But you crave excitement. Each desire cancels out the other. Yet both feel equally real. Psychologists call this approach avoidance conflict. Your mind becomes a battlefield. Two forces pulling in opposite directions at the same time. But there's a deeper layer. Even a single desire can contain its own opposite. When you want pleasure, part of you also fears losing it. When you want success, part of you already dreads what happens after. Desire isn't one clean movement. It's a spiral. A loop feeding back into itself. That's why satisfaction never lasts. The moment you achieve one thing, another longing takes its place, or the victory feels empty. This is why some ancient philosophies, Buddhism, Stoicism, speak of ending desire altogether, not as a rejection of life, but as a way to step outside the loop. But here's where the paradox sharpens. Even the desire to end desire is still a desire. The wish for peace is still a form of wanting. You cannot escape it by fighting it. It's like trying to pull yourself up by your own hair. Effort stacked on effort, going nowhere. Now pause for a moment. Think of the thing you want most right now. Ask yourself, is there another part of me pulling the opposite way? Because more often than not, the answer is yes. And the real challenge isn't choosing one side. It's learning to stand still in the middle, where both desires meet, where longing and letting go become the same thing. You wake up and plan your day. What to wear, where to go, what to say. It feels normal, this quiet belief that you're in control of your life. But what if that control is nothing more than a story you tell yourself? This is the paradox of the illusion of control. It starts with simple psychology. Experiments show that people often overestimate how much power they have over outcomes. You press a button and believe it caused a result, even when it didn't. This happens with small things. Feeling like you can make traffic lights change faster, or believing you influence someone's mood just by thinking about them. But it also happens with larger things. Careers, relationships, health. You believe that planning carefully, acting decisively, guarantees a result. Yet life rarely unfolds that cleanly. Weather shifts. People change. Accidents happen. The world moves on rules far bigger than your will. Now take it deeper. Philosophers and neuroscientists both point toward the same unsettling truth. Even your own mind may not be fully under your control. Thoughts arise on their own. Desires appear without permission. Memories surface uninvited. You are not the author, you are more like the reader, watching the words appear as you turn the pages. And here's where the paradox sharpens. The more tightly you try to control things, the more out of control they feel. You try to calm your mind, and it races faster. You try to hold a relationship steady, and it drifts away. You try to force success, and end up trapped by stress. The tighter the grip, the more things slip through your fingers. Like holding water in a clenched fist. Ancient traditions recognize this. Taoism speaks of wu-wei, effortless action, letting things unfold without force. But here's the twist. Even choosing not to control is, in itself, a form of control. You can never fully step outside the loop. So now pause. Look at your life. Things you think you control, and ask yourself quietly, am I guiding this? Or am I simply watching it happen? Because sometimes letting go feels exactly like holding on. You study, you learn, you gather facts, skills, experiences. It feels like progress, like adding bricks to the structure of your mind. But what if, with every new brick you add, an old one quietly slips away? This is the paradox of knowledge, making you forget. At first, it sounds like a simple memory issue. Everyone forgets things. But the deeper truth is that learning doesn't just replace old knowledge, it erases it. Psychologists call it interference theory. The more new information you collect, the harder it becomes to retrieve what you already knew, like writing on the same chalkboard over and over until the original words disappear beneath the dust. But it's not just about facts. When you adopt a new belief, the old one fades. When you master a new skill, the previous way of doing things feels distant. Foreign. Your mind edits itself constantly, making room for what feels most important now, while quietly letting go of what once seemed essential. There's a deeper layer too. Some kinds of knowledge don't just replace facts. They replace perspective. A child looks at the world with wide, open eyes. No theories, no systems. Just experience as it is, but as you grow, that raw experience gets covered by layers of knowledge. Names, labels, categories, tree, sky, person, time. The cost of understanding is forgetting how to simply see. Philosophers call this the loss of beginner's mind. And here's where the paradox sharpens. The more you know, the harder it becomes to remember what it was like not to know, to clear your map. The less aware you are of the landscape beneath it. This is why Zen teachings often encourage unlearning, returning to simplicity, letting go of accumulated knowledge, to rediscover direct experience, not because knowledge is bad, but because knowledge can blind as easily as it can reveal. Now, pause. Think about something you've mastered in your life. A language, a skill, a way of thinking. Can you remember what it felt like before you knew? Before the names, before the systems? That space still exists. But it's buried beneath everything you've learned. And sometimes, to see clearly again, you must be willing to forget. You check the clock. 1 second passes, then another. Time flows forward, always forward. Or so it seems. But what if time isn't as simple as you believe? This is the paradox of time moving backward. It begins with physics. At the deepest levels of reality, quantum mechanics, thermodynamics, time isn't always one directional in certain equations. Time can run both ways, from future to past as easily as from past to future. But even without science, you feel this paradox in your own life. Think of memory. Memory doesn't flow forward. It pulls you backward into moments long gone, feelings long past. Yet those memories shape what you do next. In a way, the past reaches into the future through you. But there's a deeper layer. Some decisions feel as if they were made before you even knew you had a choice. You walk into a room and feel déjà vu. You meet someone and it feels inevitable. As if part of your future was already waiting for you. pulling you toward it. Philosophers call this retrocausality, the idea that effects can influence causes, and while it sounds impossible, experiments in certain areas of physics suggest strange hints that future events may subtly affect the present. Now take it deeper. Even your mind experiences time differently when you pay attention. During pain, time stretches. During joy, it collapses. In deep focus or meditation, time can feel like it disappears altogether. So what is time, really? Not a line, not a clock. More like a circle or maybe something stranger, a spiral twisting forward and backward at once. And here's the paradox sharpened. The more you try to control time, the more it controls you. Chasing the future, escaping the past. But both are already inside you, shaping each other. So now pause. Breathe slowly. Think not of where you're going, but of where you have already been, and how in a quiet way it's still unfolding right now. Time moving backward and forward, both at once. You wake up and feel it quietly. The sense that you are you. Not just a body, not just a mind, but something deeper. A soul. That silent presence looking out from behind your eyes. But what if that soul doesn't actually belong to you? This is the paradox of the soul belonging to no one. It begins with ancient philosophy. Many traditions describe the soul as the true self, unchanging, eternal, yours. But some, especially in Buddhism and certain branches of mysticism, say something radically different. They suggest there is no fixed soul at all. Instead, what you call the soul is just a momentary awareness passing through a body. Like wind through a room. Now, take it deeper. Even modern neuroscience hints at this. When scientists search for the self inside the brain, they don't find a single center. No single location. Just patterns, memories, habits, sensations, all constantly shifting. The self is not a thing. It's a process. Like a flame, visible, real, but always changing shape. And here's where the paradox sharpens. The more tightly you cling to your soul as mine, the more distant it becomes. Because what you're really holding on to is an idea and a concept layered with stories, beliefs, names. But the actual awareness behind all of that is not personal. It's simply consciousness. Raw, formless. Think of it like this. The same sun shines on every window, but each person believes the light inside their room is somehow special, different. The truth is quiet. It's not your light. It's just light, your soul, the feeling of selfhood, maybe just like that. A universal field passing through individual forms, appearing as you for a while, then moving on, not disappearing, not dying. Just changing shape. So now pause. Feel the quiet inside yourself, that silent watcher behind your thoughts, and ask gently, is this really mine? Or is it simply awareness flowing through this moment, belonging to no one at all? You've now walked through 25 paradoxes. Some felt like riddles, others like quiet truths hiding beneath ordinary life. But as you reach this final moment, one last paradox waits. There's no final moment, because each paradox leads into the next. Each answer dissolves into a new question. You searched for freedom, only to find it felt like a cage. You searched for light, only to be blinded by it. You searched for identity, only to watch it consume itself. And through it all, you may have felt something familiar. That strange weight behind your thoughts. That quiet echo after each realization. This isn't just philosophy. This is the shape of your own mind, reflected back to you in sharper detail. What these paradoxes reveal is not a hidden truth waiting to be solved, but a loop, a circle that expands the more you chase it. The mind cannot step outside itself to see itself fully. The soul cannot truly own itself. You live in a house with mirrors on every wall, but there is no room beyond them. That's the nature of deep awareness. It's not about finding solid ground. It's about learning to stand still in the middle of shifting shadows. So as this journey closes, there's no need to force understanding. Let the paradoxes unfold quietly in your mind. Let them fade and return on their own. Some will stick with you. Some will dissolve. but all of them point to the same silent fact. Reality doesn't need to be fixed to be beautiful. Thought doesn't need to end to feel complete. The unknown isn't something to escape, it's something to listen to. Like a voice born from silence, thank you for walking this path, or perhaps walking in circles until the path disappears, now take a breath and begin again.